Hi, everybody. I have a special guest today, my friend Rick Batenburg the third. Rick, to start, how did we meet? Do you remember how we met?
Oh, I hunted you down. That's how we met. I was maybe like 6 years ago hosting a party I very affectionately called the Inspiration Party, and was just it was purposeful, built with the group of really extraordinary human beings I was attempting to bring together in an extremely unstructured environment with the purpose of, inspiring Socratic method conversation about, whatever it was they were doing. It was a lot of asymmetrical people that I thought might find each other interesting. And that led me to researching polymathy, which led me to your research when I reached out to you, and you ended up attending that party, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
and you know some amazing people. Whew,
You know
really?
what? And I would count you among them. Of course, I've been very lucky to find a lot of really spectacular human beings, like compassionate, empathetic, successful, ambitious, unique, just full of piss vinegar and conviction. And I have been really lucky for them to share their, stories, diversity of skill set and experience with me. And part of it is in my experience with polymaths, which again I didn't even know the word till I found you. Um, they all have sort of a shared emotional courage that I've found, that's kind of tracks across almost all of them, is that they have this boldness about them, and that can be, real boldness, jumping off all kinds of dangerous things. But the manifestation I'm always most interested in is when they chase down a curiosity. Right, curiosity is the root of all knowledge, but that really is, I think, what leads to this polymathy is sort of a general curiosity. They want to know why. They want to be um, truly informed. And I think that is really where this ends, is that it is a diversity of skill set and information. And that information that you have creating the data set that you're working from is something I find all polymaths are trying to expand all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and that really, I think, is part of the reason I'm so interested in your work, is because when you can use a diversity of skill set and information of one person, and a diversity of skill set from another person, even just two people. You know, Socratic method is an extraordinarily powerful tool in solving problems, because I don't have to know everything you know, and you don't have to know everything I know. We just have to be having a vulnerable conversation, an honest conversation, that I trust that you would bring anything relevant to the conversation or the problem, and that you trust that I would bring everything that I could to that problem, in a impassioned and focused way. And that's part of the other reason I like sitting on board of directors, is that's precisely what, those are designed to do. Different representations from different specialities that are designed to, navigate whatever vertical that company is participating in. So your goals, I think, are truly altruistic, and I always believe altruism is more like absolute zero, but you can get close. So your ambitions for, putting together all these polymaths, I think, is similar in the way that you have seen the impact of, or the power, or just like the pure, like true inspiration, of when polymaths get together. And I think that, you were talking a little bit about, your work in prison, and all the work in government you've done, and all these different kind of subsect, of our, moral fabric, that are the governing bodies and the oppressed bodies.
Hmm.
Um, and you found polymaths everywhere. And I have found something similar in the way that they come in all shapes and sizes. So, I believe your application of trying to use these people to a more purposeful end to help the world, broad strokes. So I apologize if I'm butchering it, but um, I believe that's a wonderful thing. And again, I think part of this is that we don't really know where it's going to go, but that's okay. And that's the purpose, is that acknowledging that there's people that know shit you don't, and having that, walking that line between humility and conviction of, okay, I know what I know, but an understanding that part of that is understanding how much you don't know, and the acknowledgement that there's other people out there that you can learn from and that can help, I think is something that is very unique about polymaths. There's a lot of specialists, I think, that are very, very excellent in their own field, and they're excellent in, one field more specifically, that push the bounds of our human knowledge, period. And in fact, often those are people that are pushing those bounds, that are figuring things out. But at the same time, I think that that focus on that focus and that lack of kind of social interaction and that, and I mean social, like internet was invented for college professors to share research. That was like its main purpose. That was the whole goal, right? So we understand that we need each other, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily encourage more constructive and broad conversation that also can help move the needle. And what I've found is that most polymaths are not they're not shut-ins, or at least the ones that I found, because most of the ones that I find are out.
You have the
But
fun kind.
that's, you know what? I always have the fun kind. I'll give you that. Yeah, it's,
So thank you for all of that. And yeah, I agree. Like it's good to know things, but we should never stop learning. That should never stop.
you know,
Um,
I think if you don't look back at your past behavior and cringe, you're not growing as a person. So
Good one. So what I'd like to do next, Rick, is just tell people about who you are, what you're in. I mean, God, you're such an amazingly strong modern polymath. And please don't be shy.
kind of you. It's very kind of you.
Please go through the list. You were
You know,
nominated for Forbes 30 under 30. You're in
I,
venture capital. You own a hockey team. Like, please just tell it.
I'm just a dumb hockey player, really, is the truth. I started playing hockey when I was 3. I moved to Vancouver when I was 17. Played, junior hockey in Canada for 3.5 years, and then I went to college back east. Went to underwater basket weaving school. I was there to play hockey, is the truth. And then I worked for Merrill Lynch for 3.5 years. I worked in managed money over there, and I ran the syndicate, which is all the IPO new issue for Colorado for Merrill Lynch. And then in 2015, I kind of saw an opportunity in cannabis I couldn't ignore, right? Which was really not necessarily just the cannabis, but the inefficiency of the regulatory condition across the US and the lack of capital that was coming in. So I started a venture capital firm with my father, largely to assess the cannabis market. And I started the pro hockey team around the same time in 2015. So, I chose not to go play pro after college. I chose to work for Merrill Lynch and sell my soul. So, um, I think I was sitting on the bench at like a men's league, beer league game about 2 years after college at like 10 o'clock at night, watching some extraordinarily talented hockey players phone it in. And I was just like, this is not hockey. So I'll spare you the details, but I bought ice in Breckenridge and started marketing a pro team. So 10 years later, I actually own the league now. So I own the team in Breckenridge, and then I still play for the team in Breckenridge here. We'll see how much my knee and my shoulder actually have left in it, but it's really the only thing I've ever loved. So, business was always a backup plan. But so I like being in venture capital really because you get to see so much, right? And I truly believe that putting the people, ideas, and resources together to create value is like the real magic of the world, right? When you're able to do that, it's like magic, right? Like, and my first real hands-on experience with that was when I created the hockey team. And, I really did it because I wanted to play good hockey still. And the result was so much more. And really, it was really cool to see a community build around the team, whether that's like the kids that are coming. I had a mom come up to me last year and, or maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. And she was like, my son plays hockey because he used to come to the Viper games. And that was like, took my breath away, honestly. Cause I was like, first of all, I was like, Jesus, it's been that long. But second was, I can't think of anything cooler for someone to say to me. Because hockey's done so much for my life and my character, but so much that it was it was cool to see that we had an impact outside of a bunch of washed up hockey players getting to live their glory days again, scoring goals in front of fans. So it's been a really cool
Glory
journey.
days.
Well, it's been a cool journey to like give that, a lot of the guys that play for me are guys that maybe they like didn't quite get their shot. I've seen guys develop later in their career. So we got like ex-NHL guys, AHL, ECHL. And just to see there's nothing quite like scoring goals in front of fans. So it's cool. So the leagues, all the way from California, Texas, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and there's one team in Texas. So it's a cool thing. I own the league as of 2 seasons ago, and it's been another big fun project to figure out. I understand why everybody hates Gary Bettman at the NHL commissioner, because there's no real winning with any of these fucking guys. So, but I was very lucky to learn from a senior partner at Merrill Lynch. And so I really learned every part of the capital stack. So everything from, angel investor, venture, private equity, institutional stuff, and then all the way from, structuring private deals and, all kinds of different safe and all kinds of fancy financing. But I became a specialist in kind of capital strategy. So what that means is that there's a lot of startup companies. They may have a great CEO and they may have a great product, but capital strategy is something that lacks a lot of companies, even if they're in a really great market position. That means taking in the right type of capital, not taking on too much, not heavily diluting your cap table, not taking in high interest debt, not taking on 3x, safe note conversions that cripple the company. And I've seen it a bunch of times where companies are really good, but they've already given away the farm and there's nowhere for them to go, or they basically limit their own margin by the scarcity of capital and taking on high interest debt, or there's just a variety of different things, and maximizing their eventual return and or exit or whatever that might be. So I found that there was a lot of value in that, and especially a value in that in cannabis, simply because of the lack of institutional capital and just the lack of investors in general. So in Colorado at the time, you had to be a 2-year Colorado resident just to get a license. And I was able to structure a fund, and actually I have a great mentor, Heather Potters, who Ernst & Young's person here twice. She was a hedge fund manager, and now she started and is the CEO chairman for PharmaJet, which is a needleless injection site that has a contract with the WHO all over the world. She's fucking rad. And I was grinding at this problem, trying to create a fund that I would allow outside investors to invest into cannabis without A, exposing them to too much risk, and B, just having a structure that it was federally and in the state of Colorado legal. And I went up to see her, and she, like, between meetings, we was just like, oh, you just do it like this, and we became the first qualified institutional fund in the country to hold a licensed asset inside of a fund. And so my assessment of the cannabis industry was pretty simple. We need the most flexible funding instrument that we possibly could get. And then that ability to move and shake with what would be the regulatory development that we've seen over the last 9 years. And so the point of that was, we bought everything in the supply chain, right? Grow, extraction, packaging, hardware, compliance, training, you name it. We owned one of them, and that was to get a diligence baseline, because it didn't exist didn't exist at all in cannabis, because there was a new industry. And then we decided what part of the supply chain that we wanted to be in, and didn't really necessarily want to be in the growing business, like growing the grain for Grey Goose. So you don't really want to be in the liquor store business, because, geographic loyalty only. So it's not scalable. So where we ended up was brand and distribution. So we bought the Clear, which is a brand out of California. It was invented in 2013 and was actually the first distillate ever invented. That's why it's called the Clear, is because it was Kleenex. Nobody knew what distillate was. And so we bought that brand because it was really popular in the California medical market, with no advertising, marketing, anything like that. It was just because the product was really good. And then after acquiring that, we basically consolidated all the assets that were necessary to facilitate the safe and consistent distribution of that product across the United States and world. So we currently are distributing coast to coast in 12 states. And obviously, huge news today, Biden announced that they're officially going to reschedule. Although I will admit that I knew that for about the last 3 months after meeting with a couple senators. So we've been waiting for this Schedule 3 shift for a long time. So basically everything I've done up until this point from the venture perspective and by means of cannabis, at least, has been posturing for this moment. So the next 5 to 7 years should be pretty exciting. But so in my venture, I guess, experience and over the last years, largely what I'll do is we'll take a position in a company and then sit on the board of directors. And what we mostly help with is capital strategy and corporate governance and making sure a company is structured that looks and feels like something can be funded, bought, funded, sold, audited, et cetera. So, I've sat on different types of boards. I sit on a nonprofit board. I sit on Bet Booth, which is a legal gambling company that invented a machine that allows you to bet on your phone and then go to any of their ATMs and get cashed out in cash. And they have some kind of unique age verification software and tools that can retrofit existing machines, especially over in Europe, to make them safer so there's not underage gambling, et cetera. So, but the point of my answer to this question, I suppose, was I like venture capital because of the diversity of things that come into your office, and the people that are pitching you are people that are highly motivated, and they are very optimistic human beings generally, and they also are motivated to educate me on whatever it is that they think they have something novel in, right? So we talk about pushing the bounds of humanity, human knowledge, zeitgeist, whatever you want to say, technology, whatever it is. Those are the people that are going to do it because they believe they can. And so first, if they want to tell me why they're better, then first they have to contextualize the market position and vertical that they're looking to assess, right? Like if I don't, you can tell me that you're better than X company all day, but if I don't know anything about what either of your companies do, it doesn't matter, right? So having somebody who's impassioned, optimistic, and super knowledgeable about a specific industry to the point where they thought that they have something better than the vertical they want to assess. Generally, those people are going to do a really good job educating me on a specific subsect of a vertical or whatever it might be. So that always excites me is talking to smart people that are passionate about a specific subject that they know a lot about. This is the fastest way to learn anything, in my opinion, or at least the fastest way that I learned is somebody who is an expert that is, in real time contextualizing the information for you. And I may have the ability to ask questions for clarification. You can learn more at talking with somebody in an hour than you can for years of study, right? Because they're going to be able to go, this is all the information that you should be paying attention to, right? And this is why it's significant, right? And this is what it means, and here's what we're going to, So that I think has always excited me about working in venture. So again, with my curiosity, I really don't have a specific subsect of businesses that I necessarily like, some that I particularly don't like, but for the most part, what I'm looking for is the people. So, the CEO, founder, whoever's going to be running it is generally, if they have an emotional connection to this success or failure of the company, is somebody you want to invest in, and that they truly understand their numbers and that they are logically qualified to assess the vertical that they're going into. And that's kind of like, my got to be this tall to be able to ride the ride. And if they have all three of those things, then we can talk about their company and we can talk about what it is that, why they think they're going to be successful and how much money they need, right? And so I think that specifically has led me to being involved with companies I never thought I'd be involved with because, I was like so impressed by this person, and that my curiosity was like, okay, well, let's see, have they really got something cool figured out? And there is sort of just a childlike, that's really cool. Like, let's go see what this is. So, in doing that, and then obviously on the other side of every venture capital firm is the most important part, which is you need money to invest, which means that you need investors. And so, the first fund was laser focused on cannabis. And you remember, this is 2015, 2016. So still federally illegal. The climate of cannabis is still extraordinarily hostile. And largely the people who have the money are not necessarily, right? We're talking about accredited investors because it couldn't be unaccredited, right? So we're talking about large private investors that, so accreditation means that you are worth more than 2.5 million net of your house and cars, right? Which gives you the ability to invest in a private deal that's not register with the SEC, which of course I couldn't register with the SEC because it's Colorado and it's, federally illegal, right? So hence the creative structuring of the fund itself. So what that meant though is that I couldn't have anyone that's not accredited. So basically I was going with a 110-page private placement memorandum that was basically 10 pages of here's our plan, and another 100 pages of here's how you're going to lose all your money and there's nothing we can do about it, and we have full control over your assets. So I was asking for a lot, which is basically a blank check. And I had just come from Maryland and I'd raised a fair bit of money. And I was feeling pretty confident. So I was like, fuck this, I'm going to go raise a venture capital, like I'm going to raise $20 million to do this. Oh my God. No, it took me 2 years to raise 300 grand, fell flat on my face right away. Eventually we ended up raising a good amount of money, and it took a long time to find all these people that had the level of conviction, okay, to take this large of a risk, and for them to trust me that much, because I can't exactly, I probably can't emphasize enough how let's call it atypical the PPM was, just by nature of cannabis, because they couldn't have any kind of voting rights or voting control, or really no recourse. They didn't even, they couldn't even know what's in the fund, right? And that was because we had to protect the investor from being licensed as a owner of a cannabis company in Colorado, which was you had to fingerprint them. They had to go in for background check. They had to do all these things, right? So, anyway, the reason that is significant is because the people that did and do invest in us are people that I have an extraordinarily personal relationship that I found by hook or crook, right? Like this is to get this funded in the way that we had it funded took a tremendous amount of effort in finding the right type of human being that could make this choice, right? To trust in me personally and what we're doing, and that believed that cannabis was going to be more legal than it was today, right? And that was their belief, right? Like you can got to read the tea leaves, especially 2016. The amount of opposition, even the overall climate at the federal level was very different. So the people that had that level of trust in me, and that kind of heralds back to, I think, what we were talking about before we went online here, is that the type of people that I think can do that are full of this emotional courage that gives them the ability to make their own choices and live with their own truth, right? Not necessarily looking for how they want other people to see them, but maintaining a really strong understanding of who they are and what they believe, and then willing to act on that, right? Which is the biggest thing, right? Because when you don't act on it, that's when you get in misalignment, right? That's when you feel shitty because you're acting in asymmetrical movement of your truth, right? So people that act with truth and conviction through whatever it is that they want to do. In this case, and in my case, in this very, very specific and small example, was that they wrote a check to some crazy fucking kid who had no company, no product, nothing to show them, just a plan. And luckily, so far, we're still here, and we have one of the largest brands in the United States. So, that's part of the reason that I was so motivated to find these incredible people, right? Because it takes somebody who did it their own way. You find a lot of CEOs, you find a lot of doctors, you find a lot of just really unique, talented human beings that are very multidimensional. And it's been the pleasure of my 10 years here doing this to call those people friends, and most of them were friends, but before they were investors. But I fell in love with these people, literally, just with who they were, and the level of honesty and vulnerability that they live their life with is so inspiring. Sincerely, is so inspiring, just to see people that are vibrantly themselves. And just to see the happiness that it creates for them and the people around them to be the same person to everyone, I think is something that is sometimes it takes courage, but it's like anything else, it gets easier the more you do it. And it, I think, inspires others when you see other people that are being, violently themselves. It makes you feel more confident, I think, to be more like yourself. And so it's almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy that I think the people that are comfortable for anyone to be around, regardless of who they are, is that if they are exactly the person that they are and you don't feel like they're obfuscating anything from you, which we're pretty sensitive instruments to this, shockingly, whether we realize it or not. But you're like, oh, that person was, it made me uncomfortable, or that person, you don't connect with that person because you feel like they're holding something back, and then that makes you distrust them, right? And again, a lot of this can be on a very subconscious level. But just being around all these very inspirational human beings, and them also having the time and patience to have vulnerable, honest conversations with me, to teach me about, their background and their, how they got to where they are, has been the most valuable thing in my professional and personal development, both philosophically and literally. So, I literally seeked, was looking, didn't know I was looking for you, but I was looking for you after I noticed this pattern. And lo and behold, we became friends. So I'm, very grateful for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're such a badass, so inspiring, so unstoppable, so yourself. I love it. And you've touched upon something that I realize is an important topic I have never discussed.
Okay.
And it's so important. It's so deep what you've said. And when we spoke before the recording began, you said I'm the same person to everyone. And I went, that we need to talk about that. Because
Sure.
a lot of the burden of being a polymath
Yeah.
is feeling like I never fit in anywhere. I have to be a different version of myself depending on who I'm talking to. Some people, if I tell them the truth of who I am, they're going to think I'm lying and intimidating, exaggerating, boasting. Like if I show up as myself, it's not okay. And so I'm going to put all this energy into trying to remember who to be for which person. And this is like a common polymath experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
you're doing the opposite, which is I'm just going to be one version of myself no matter where I go. So what would you say to the people who are trapped in the I'm non-conforming secretly, but then in social settings, I'll just try to fit in rather than show up truly authentically. What would you say to
Well,
them?
a couple things. I would say that, one, don't be ashamed of the fact that you feel that way, because it's a natural human element to feel that way, right? So that's the first thing, is that acknowledging it, and then also, right, understanding that this will take emotional courage, meaning it'll take work, and it'll take, internal thought process, and it's going to take introspection to overcome with this emotional courage, because the first thing you have to do is decide, um, okay, well, who the fuck am I? Right.
Which isn't
And I think
easy.
no, it's not easy.
Takes
And it's
time,
not,
effort.
it is, well, it takes introspection. And I think part of it is chasing down. Philosophy is nothing more than assigning words to feelings. And so, some of the great philosophers that came before us were nice enough to write down some of those words. So, you can get a head start, but your ability to understand how you feel is really what we're talking about. And then be able to articulate why you feel that way. And then you can reverse engineer your situation from there, right? Great
Mhm.
example would be,
Yeah.
I feel cold, you make it warmer. Right now, most of our situations are much more complex than that, and they involve social situations, et cetera. So why am I unhappy? How about, right? Okay, well, if you don't know why you're unhappy, it's going to be really fucking hard to change anything about your, who you are, what you're doing, right, to change your mood. So, um, the second thing is, nobody fucking cares, right? Is really the truth. Is that, short of some sort of truly offensive thing to humanity, people generally aren't. The intrigue is much more damaging to the relationship than the truth is, even if the truth is more shocking. So, the point of that is that people don't like being lied to, right? They want to know who you are, and they also will take almost everything at face value when it feels authentic. So, um, it's when you've began relationships generally as someone else, and then there's like this reveal, because especially when that broad sense of kind of different audiences. And you and I were talking about before we started recording about how, everyone has a Facebook page now. So where we used to have relationships in a tribe, right now we have an audience of people that have a diversity of skill set and information and a working paradigm of who we are, right? So when you say something to your Facebook wall, for example, and you've got someone that you grew up with and a current college professor and someone you work with or whatever it is, right? That they have a different working knowledge of you, depending on what that thing is. All of those people are going to interpret that different and they're going to change their paradigm of who you are. Now, you're going to be anxious about how whatever it is that information is going out, and maybe that's going to be great for one group and you're a little worried about how grandma might see it. But again, if that person thinks you're someone that you're not, right, and you've done that on purpose, those are going to be the toughest relationships to overcome, because basically you need to go to that person, and whether you actually say this or not, you've ostensibly lied to that person. So that's a motherfucker. Now, here's what I will say is that acknowledging you made a mistake, right, and explaining to them why goes a long way. In fact, that's the whole thing, right? Now, you don't have to go up to them, I lied to you, right? But it's more like you're like, hey, I want to share something with you because this relationship is important to me and I want you to know who I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how we approach it, not, but regardless, whenever you've made a choice to lie to anyone, now, whether that's a lie of omission or it's a lie of, you're literally lying. It's, in my opinion, and again, I'm playing with a broad brush just for the sake of the example, if you will. Anytime that you have lied to someone, you have told them that you either A, don't think they can handle the truth, or you don't think that they're capable of changing whatever it is, or you don't care enough about them to be vulnerable. Regardless, it's a sign of disrespect, in my opinion. Now,
yeah, for sure.
that is walks in, I'll call it a paradox, but it's a social contract. So really what it is you will be honest with people as a function directly correlated to the closeness of your relationship. So someone that your best friend you're really close with, you're like, dude, you're getting fat. Now, you wouldn't necessarily do that to a stranger you met somewhere, right? Now, the function of that is because you're closest of the relationship with that person. So there is a middle ground there somewhere between social contract, right? Like get along to go along in society. You're not going to walk around with that guy's fucking ugly. That guy needs a new haircut, right? So now, whether you think that or not, right, it would break social contract because people would be offended. Now, being offended is also a stupid fucking thing, but we won't get into that. But point being is that the more close relationships that you have and the more vulnerable you are with more people, the more you can leverage the diversity and skill set of those people. Now, if they don't know what's going on in your life, well, they're going to have a tough time helping you. Now, if you have a working set of their knowledge base, their data set, diversity of skill set and information, and their experiences in life, and something that you come across, right? Even if it's embarrassing, right? Let's pick something embarrassing. Something happens, right? You get an injury or something that, you don't want anyone to know, but you have had vulnerable, honest conversations with somebody that had a shared experience. Now you get someone to call who has information that you don't have. Now, that doesn't happen unless that you have a emotional and honest working data set of their skill set, so that inspires a conversation. And then all of a sudden, now we're solving problems, right? So that shared experience I found is really the key to being, I described it earlier as being the same person to everyone. And really, that takes practice, right? And it takes, especially if you already have a working network of people, it takes time and it takes emotional courage, and it takes and it's like anything, it's like pruning a bush. You constantly have to check yourself, because we have a natural predication to, maintain a sense of pride and who we are and who the world thinks we are. And people so you go through this all the time, right? This is constantly happening. You constantly have to make sure that you're true to yourself, I think. And especially people that are like polymaths and do a lot of fucking things, and that's not saying that you should change and develop as a human being, right? That's not really it is. But when I say be the same person, is that you're always acting with conviction to your own truth, right? You're not adjusting that for fitting in.
You're not going to act. You're not going to act like a different fitting in. That needs to be on a t-shirt. So, you know what I just want to observe? I think it's become normalized to be inauthentic. Like that's the thing that everyone does. It's like monkey see, monkey do.
Just easier. it's just easier. I'm not sure that it's been normalized. Frankly, I don't. I think that no, definitely not actually. Let me tell you why I disagree is because um, we have always used a working paradigm in every culture, every civilization of this is how you should live your life, right? So there's always a social contract, and it changes based on culture, time, place, and that's part of the other reason that it's not really necessary for you to not change as a person. You should change as a person. It's because it changes culturally all the time. So I can say social contract, and basically what I'm, just it's just a very shorthand way of describing the societal agreements, non-spoken agreements that we have between each other to function in a larger society that we don't have individual relationships with as part of our ability to function as a higher civilization, right? So that the bar moves all the time, right? Moves all the time, right? So that is really the key, I think, is that we are not normalizing fitting in. It's just a natural human thing to want to get along, to go along, to
Sure.
participate in society. So I'm not sure that it's been normalized. I think that the difference is this, is that if for the most part, I think, right, in most countries or cultures, let's say cultures, not countries, because they're subsects of things. So in most cultures, people aren't uncomfortable within their own culture, right?
Mhm.
So what I mean by that is like in Japan, they're much more comfortable being physically closer to one another, right? They like the and in right the United States, you're like, oh, right, everyone's jumpy now, but that doesn't mean that people aren't uncomfortable within the context of their own culture. Like they're not fighting it. Most of the social contracts, everyone's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like they're not fighting that. So
Mhm.
the fitting in component of it, I think, has more to do with like anytime that someone's going to not fit in to their specific subset of culture is generally not a time when it's like, oh, this person's just weird. It's that they're usually just the first. That it's a shift, and the shift is what the turbulent time, right? Is the turbulent time because it changes all the time, right? It's developed throughout our civilizations, and so generally when someone's different, it's usually pretty likely that they're not going to be the last one, by natural progression of our society, especially if that person looks happy and things are working for them, and like, oh, maybe they're doing something right. And I have a really interesting example of this, I guess, is that, I stopped drinking about 5 years ago, and fucking almost none of my friends drink now. And I didn't like preach this, right? Like I wasn't, right. This is just something that kind of naturally happened over a course of some time. And they all want to tell me too, of course. And I'm like, it's fucking awesome. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to hear it. Right. Drugs and water are the future. But um, regardless, it at the time I did it, all my friends, all our investors and everything were kind of like, what the fuck? Right? It was just different. And again, I really frankly didn't give a shit, but that's sort of the whole jam. Um, so, and I could be right or wrong. It doesn't really matter. The point being is that, right, people try things that look like they work. Um, and so, but you have to have the emotional courage to try things, right? And that's where people get stuck, right? So, religions, etc. Sometimes people are a little too pot committed to that, and they've invested so much of their life and time into that paradigm that when something that comes up challenges that, whether it's internally or externally, you see these, we're seeing it in the Middle East, we see it in the United States, the bifurcation of the ideals of America, right? You have got a generation that is wrapped up in the idea that, we're a Christian country, and you got a different younger generation that is completely the antithesis of that. So, yeah, I was one right and one wrong. I mean, I have a strong opinion, but it doesn't really fucking matter, right? The point is that we're on the brink of a change, right? We're on the brink of a massive social change on a macro scale. And I've noticed this over the last probably 5, 6 years, the acceleration of this and the retribalization of our world, right? And because we're the migration of the world has been like it's never been ever, right? And the other piece of this, it's not about where you're born, right? It's people are united by their ideals. They're not united by their land anymore. So it's creating this turbulence everywhere. And so I like to like calling it the digital renaissance.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing new formations of art, right, in the digital form, and the world's just changing, right? It's going to be turbulent here for the next 20 years, I would guess, at least. At any rate, the people that are going to lead that change are the polymaths, period. They're the people that are willing to change, they're willing to try things, they're willing to make mistakes, and they have confidence and truth and conviction in their heart for what it could be. And they're not trying to maintain the status quo.
Not trying to fit in too much, because then you
I don't
get the
think it's trying to
status
fit.
quo.
I mean, if your priority is fitting in, then you're fucked. I
You're
mean,
fucked.
you're
Yeah.
not changing anything. Well, but there's nothing wrong with fitting in, frankly. Like if you found a group of peers that like you guys all jam, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter because it's not about fitting in or not fitting in, right? It doesn't matter at all, right? You have to be violently yourself. Whether you fit in or not is irrelevant, right? Like that's completely irrelevant. Some things are going to fit in, some things won't, right? But the point is that that can't be the priority. That can't
Yeah.
be. That's
I
the only thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was thinking too, I just did a post on this the other day, like in a similar vein to just like being the same person with everyone and
Yeah,
like being socially appropriate, fitting in, but not trying so much to fit in that you show up inauthentic to your who you
uh,
really are.
you
Also,
can be
some things,
polite.
huh?
You can be polite. That's
Yeah,
really
be
all it
polite, but
is.
be honest, be truthful.
Yeah.
Um, know your audience, but also, so when it comes to caring what people think, I think like we should and we shouldn't. Like we should care what people think because we should care about other people. Like we should care about how we impact other people. We should care about learning new perspectives. Like we should care what other people think very fucking much. And that's
Well,
part of the
so
problem. But we
so
shouldn't
here's
care so much that we don't say what we think.
so here's my issue, right? First, and Monica would be laughing if she was sitting next to me, is that I fucking hate the word should. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's not avoidable, like in the way that you phrased it, kind of. Now, though, but let me explain why. Is that things either are or they fucking aren't, right? And I always try to encourage my people that work with me not to use that word, right? And because it implies that you either aren't going to do it or that it can't be done or whatever it might be, right? So we talk about that you should care about people think. Hmm, the reason I like it is because of the ambiguity. I think that especially with something this nuanced requires of specificity in language because again, philosophy is nothing but more than assigning words to feelings. And what we're talking about is a psychosomatic philosophy of how we should treat one another based off of the closeness of our relationships. So what I'm saying is that specifically your ability to develop close relationships is a function of your ability to be vulnerable, right? Vulnerability builds trust builds relationships, relationship builds infrastructure builds empires. It starts with vulnerability and honesty. Your ability to be vulnerable and honest about who you are, right, with fucking everybody, right, is, I promise, that's the Narnia door. I promise, right? Tried and true. And the reason for that is because when you are honest and vulnerable, you will have better, closer relationships with people that can help. And we need each other, period, right? We talked about this before we started recording. We know by nature of our developmental pattern as babies to humans that we're fucking helpless for the first few years, right? We get dopamine when we bond with people. Like we are social creatures that are designed to leverage our infrastructure together, leverage our knowledge, all of that, specifically to function, right, within society. So when I talk about fitting in is not the thing, it almost is, I guess, in the way that, but the way that you need to go about that is by being vulnerable and honest, not by changing who you are, right? Because, and again, this is something that it sort of hits critical mass because the people that want to stick around and have relationships with you will stick around and have relationships with you, right? That's the thing, is
Yeah.
that if you're having trouble fitting in, you're talking to the wrong fucking people. There's nothing wrong with you, right?
Yeah. Who wants someone to
Get people
like
to
you? Who wants to be liked for being a fake version of themselves? Like it's not fulfilling. You want to be loved or hated, whatever, for who you really are.
Sure. And I would
True.
say that
Truth.
that is it. That's the whole jam. And I hope that the platform that you've created will inspire that. And I know that we talked about throwing parties, and I'm always a big fan of parties because mostly because a party is nothing more than people coming together specifically to socialize. And I think that putting smart people together in the same place and giving them an opportunity to have honest conversations is truly, one, is the most fun for me, but two, it's shocking the amount of things that people discover
Yeah.
or figure out. The amount of business that's come out of things like that is truly remarkable. So I think that the Facebook platform is awesome, and I hope that you use that as a platform to physically get people together in a way that they can be vulnerable and honest and have cool conversations about whatever it is that they're passionate about will be the most remarkable thing. So
Yeah. Polymaths have the best conversations together. Like I've heard this from so many polymaths. Like when you're well-rounded, versatile, knowledgeable, open, creative, like when you have this certain polymathic sort of profile and you get together with other people who also have that profile, it's just magical and what you can do to like stimulate and learn and explore and expand and create like that couldn't have been predicted or couldn't have been done, with just one person. So it's such a cool thing to
yeah,
get them together.
it's very exciting, I think, and I've learned so much, and it makes you appreciate all the different flavors of human.
Yeah,
And,
all the different flavors of human.
oh, I mean, it comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, but it really, when it manifests in such a cool way, it's cool to see, right? It's cool to see what some of my friends have built. Really, is
Yeah.
it's like when it becomes tangible, when ideas become tangible that are from novel individuals full of, you know truth, conviction, and energy, right? Emerson said the world belongs to the energetic, so be energetic, right? So it's an interesting mix, and to see it come to fruition, I think is that's the magic, right? Like that's the coolest part, to see the things that have um, some of my friends have built and how they've impacted other people positively is a really remarkable thing.
Well, it sounds like you know some amazing people. I've met some of them. They were pretty impressive. And I just love to meet people who are authentic and hardworking and smart and honest and who can show up as themselves wherever they are. I just find that so refreshing. And that's what I like best about you is you just completely yourself and you're a badass about it. And you're so multifaceted. The combination is really cool.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. Um, I always just been a very curious individual, I suppose. Um, and a little crazy obsessive. When I find something I like, I'll just do it to death. But I've always had a kind of a, I don't know, I've always had a ambition to like collect as many skills and like not necessarily experiences, but more like skills, like the amount of cool little things. Not sure why. It's like compulsive, but regardless, I think it definitely makes your life more interesting when it's easier to get passionate about stuff. I think then I think that's a polymath thing, is that you're just, you get excited easily. Maybe is
Yeah,
the
we're easily excitable.
right.
One other thing I want to share, and then we can wrap up because I know we've already gone over time. Sorry, is
No, you're
that
fine.
um so I am like one of those girly girls where I have a lot of shoes and a lot of sunglasses and clothes and perfumes and makeups and all. I'm a collector of like all the girly things.
Right.
And a few years ago, I was like, I would never want to be known as a collector. Like I wouldn't want to be known for that. Like I enjoy it, but and then
Yeah.
I went, what would I want to be known as a collector of? What am I actually a real collector of that matters? And it's not going to be like stamps or jewelry or cars, or
Mhm.
it's not going to be that for me. I consider myself a collector of lessons and a
Mhm.
collector of relationships.
Yeah.
I
And
even
that's
created a lesson collector brand a few years ago that sort of withered and I didn't do a lot with it. But what would you consider yourself a collector of?
of people, certainly. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not dissimilar, I think, to relationships necessarily, but I've uh, quantified it that way, I guess, as um, you know, having meaningful relationships and conversations with people that are um, inspiring to me is really important. I prioritize it in my life and make sure that I spend time with different people. And that's been the great joy of my last 10 years here, I think specifically was realizing the value of it, and then having the opportunity to meet so many cool people has been really interesting. And part of that I think is because you never fear more information, and really understanding the rosebuds of people's journey has been a really cool thing to understand, especially when there's such novel people who have accomplished crazy things. Just to kind of hear their story and understand what led them to that place, what was the odyssey of their journey, because they chose to live their life in a different way. And that inherently, I think, is special, especially when, they leave the social, path taken for a path not taken, and end up in charge of things that highly affect what becomes the path taken, that they trailblazers, is the most remarkable thing to me. So
I love a
that
trailblazer.
I'm not sure I collect much. I'm not a physically sentimental person. I don't
Hockey
necessarily.
teams? Just kidding.
God, I better not collect those. More than that, I promise.
Oh my
One
gosh.
than enough. Maybe businesses is probably the truth too. Is that
Yeah.
I own a lot of I own 1 to 5% of a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
That's always cool to me too, and it's from a similar reason, right? Like it's like, oh, this will be cool, right? This is a cool thing. I think it's a positive force on the universe. So, and that inherently, yeah, I told you previously, I always look for the people in companies, right? Like the CEO. And so you're essentially doing the same thing, but what I'm doing is investing in their vision of a future that they've described to me, and that I trust that they're the person that can get it done. And I love being helpful to that person. I love investing in investor or in CEOs and founders that are, just rabidly passionate about getting this done, because they will do things that someone who even maybe is even more qualified won't do, right? They'll be on the phone at 3 a.m. They'll do whatever it takes. And that is truly what, in my experience, what it takes to go from bootstrap startup to a real company. Is you got to have not
Heart.
just this necessarily, but you got to have, at least a CEO that can do everybody's job in the company and will do everybody's job in the company if push comes to shove. So, and there's an old story, and I don't even remember where I got it from, but I think it might be even, doesn't matter. Here's a story: is that when you're driving past somebody and their hood's up and you see them leaning against their car, you don't stop. But if you see somebody pushing the car, you get out and push, and find the ones pushing the car. You know, finds the ones that have got no funding and they're still trying to figure out a way to, write this code, or they're learning code to write their own fucking app because they can't hire somebody. Like, I want to meet, those are the people you invest in, because those are the people that are going to find a way, right? And
The learners.
and the quality that I really appreciate in CEOs, that I think is an underrated one and not talked about as much, as resourcefulness, and
Yeah.
right, their ability to find a way, right? There's no excuses, right? They will find a way to get it done, and
Yeah.
that is the key, right? So,
It's that
um,
unstoppable spirit. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm willing to keep learning until I figure it out. That's the spirit of a polymath. I will learn my way to
yeah.
the solution.
Well, and life in its most unadorned fashion is about the power of will, right? So, you know, you gotta you gotta have that will, that you gotta have a conviction in the why you're doing it, and then a absolute iron will to accomplish it.
Be
And
stubborn.
yeah, I mean, and again, like, you can describe it a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, it's what you fucking do that matters, right? It doesn't, and that's the will part, right? It's the ideas are a dime a dozen. I hear lots of great ideas, but if you're not willing to do the work to get it done, and I think that is sort of an issue right now with a lot of the companies, and some of the I'll call it the younger generation. I also acknowledge that I'm still a fairly young human being, but I'll say a lot of the kind of 22-year-old just out of college deals that I see are always some sort of engineering to take advantage of an inefficiency they've noticed in the market, where they think that they can make a penny from a billion people and they don't have to do a lot of work. They're not necessarily as worried about anything else. They just would like to get paid for doing nothing, which is really the most hilarious business strategy to me when I hear that from somebody who, you know, is trying to ask me for money to do the hardest job on the planet, because they don't want to work. So like that's
Yeah.
well, they're just trying to cross purposes, and so generally, I think that person's probably not in alignment. Um,
Hmm.
they're lying to me, or they're lying to themselves, worse. So,
Let me ask you a quick question since you're such a businessman. Because this is like one of, and sorry, I know we're supposed to wrap up, but I have to ask you
I'm all
this.
fine. All good. All
Um,
good.
in
Monica will
your
grab me if we're late for something. So,
okay, okay, cool. Um, what do you think like is it, I know it depends on the business, but as a general rule, what do you think the purpose of a business is?
well, the purpose of a business is to provide value to the people that it's, servicing and or selling products to, period. Right. So,
That's
it
the
always
pro-social answer.
well,
That's
that's the fucking thing about like that's where I always start, right? Like you have to bring it down to one person. What is your company doing to benefit the stakeholders, right? So I'll call it say stakeholders because the purpose of a company forms with a solving a problem for a customer, right? You're trying to help
exactly. Trying to
right now.
help.
You can take that one step further and then go the stakeholders. So the company should benefit the employees that are working for it, the investors that have invested into it, and the customers, right? And the people that the called ancillary companies that you work with, right? If you're in that position and you're helping all of those things, then you have created economy and value within the context of our capital society, right? Like that's the purpose of a business is to
So it's not to profit the owner?
well, I mean, that's the point, though. I think that the profit to the owner is the should or almost said should. The profit to the owner is the payment that that person gets for the courage and risk that they took on. Uh,
And that's what their
to
profit matters too.
yeah, well, I think
Right.
it absolutely matters, and I don't think fucking whether it mattered or not. I mean, it matters in the sense that if there wasn't that payoff, then less people are going to take risks and form companies and create economy. That's the main thing, right? So I always hear my very Republican grandfather whine about this specific thing is that when you want to tax owners or the people that own the companies at exorbitant rates just because they have a lot of money, it's going to disincentivize people to form businesses with the trying to create business, right? So now it's a little trickle down economy-ish for me, but at the same time, the principle, and again, there's gray areas here, but the principle is, yeah, okay, theoretically, that would make sense. Why would I start a company if I'm never going to get paid? And why would I take on the risk and invest my own capital if I thought that I could make more money going and working for someone else? I wouldn't, right? Unless I'm completely altruistic and I just, right. So the real example of this is like we have made no money, right? I've made $0 doing this in 9 years, right? We have been working building infrastructure to create a very large company. So, I've been eating ramen for 10 years, right? And there will come a day here, hopefully in the very immediate future with the announcement from Biden, where I won't be eating ramen anymore, right? But it's the sacrifice and the risk that I took on, right? At the beginning of this is why you get paid at the end, right? But the purpose of business is not to pay the owner. The purpose of business is to benefit the stakeholders. The owner is one of those stakeholders, but no, I think that that's definitely a misinterpretation of where we're at. And part of that is the function of our higher developed capital society and that the amount of consolidation that has occurred.
Yeah.
Probably part of the reason that we're seeing inflation in the housing market is the consolidation of housing by private equity firms. Um, so there is a democratization piece of this that may be more beneficial because it's designed, effectively we have companies that are way bigger than countries at this point that work on every continent in the world. And that's really what's fundamentally changed with the purpose of a company, if you will,
Hmm.
is that when you got Facebook and Apple and some of these companies that are, and even BlackRock is bigger than most countries' GDP by itself. That is run by a CEO that was not elected by the people that they are affecting, right? So Apple, for example, right? Now we elected them, so to speak, with our wallets now, but that's not to say that we elected them because we think they have our best interest in mind. You
That's the
hope,
thing.
you
That
hope. Well, but again, this is right. This is why we're in the digital renaissance. Okay. So it's like we now have an expectation of corporations to have a level of um uh care and like we expect them to have some sort of charity. We expect them to have our best interest at heart. And this is a fairly new concept, right? Because we saw it a little bit during the Industrial Revolution on micro scale, right? When unions were formed. But right, when you've got a company that is bigger than the country, that has more employees than some, like that makes more money, right? Well, right, the reason that during the the medieval times that the king was in charge is because he would do what the people who had the money wanted him to do, right? So we are seeing that on a global scale at this point, right? We have, right, that you've got one company, one guy, one board of directors being governed by 200 different places on the world, and there's no, I guess I shouldn't say there's no, but the UN basically, they're shooting rubber bullets. You know what I mean? Like it's not a real global oversight. And you got the World Bank, and you got right. But again, this is still just a consolidation of the world's richest people. So the problem with that is that because those people are not, it's tough to oversee them. How about, right? Especially when the people that are supposed to be overseeing them don't have a technical understanding of what those people are doing. So there's a power shift going on, is really the truth of it in the world. The world's commodities, we used to fight wars over salt. Okay, we fought some wars over oil, right? And different commodities throughout used to be gold, right? We wiped out the Mayans, right? Like we fought wars over, we killed each other over different commodities. And that power dynamic in the world, which is largely run by oil, which is traded in US dollars, is changing, right? We're seeing a devaluing pro rata of the US dollar against the world's currencies because of the destabilization of our own government and the inflation, macroeconomic forces and some maybe microeconomic forces and the mismanagement of a inflated bureaucracy. But all that is to say, right, oil is becoming less important from a global perspective, not irrelevant, and not anytime soon, but it is becoming less relevant, right? We're also, the US is now the largest manufacturer of oil. So as the world shifts, right, and where maybe lithium will be the most important commodity, you don't know. But the point is that oil is becoming less important, and the people that have largely gained the most power from that commodity being valuable are going to cling to power regardless of the value of that commodity. So we're talking about the Middle East, we're talking about some Arab nations, we're talking about the United States, right, which largely benefited from the production of, and point being is that that's changing. And so that always creates turmoil, which we're seeing manifest in Israel. We're seeing it manifest all over the world right now because there's a changing power dynamic that embodied with, we have the largest wealth transfer in history happening from, the generations dying that's being passed to another generation that has not maybe as vastly different beliefs than like Gen Z does to, Gen X necessarily, but still a different set of priorities, right? Which again, when there's a reallocation of the people that are in charge, i.e. the people who have all the money, right, we're going to see the world change. And anytime that there's change, there's death, and that's where we're at. So that's why we've become desensitized, especially in the last 20 years or so, that we're seeing turmoil and people die. So I don't think that lasts forever, but it will continue until we see a new power dynamic emerge. So
What power dynamic would you like to see exist in a better world in the future?
I don't know. I mean, there's going to be a recommoditization of a lot of resources. In fact, part of the reason I got into cannabis is because I believe that I can create effectively a new commodity to control, which will give me power. The truth, right? And the power to affect change, right? The power to that's the truth though. And I mean, I'd be lying to you if I told you it was not anything different, right? It was a vertical, I think that we can and will dominate on a global scale, right? I will build the Coca-Cola of cannabis. Been working for it for 10 years and I will die trying. But the point of that is that there'll be a shift in who's in charge is really the truth. So who do I want to see in charge? Me, obviously, and other people that I respect and I share their ideals, right? So and again, that's happening now. Like it's always happening, but I think it's going to happen more rapidly here just because of some of the technological jumps that we've had. That and we're seeing a retribalization. And what I mean by that is that there's division among groups that were historically in alignment. And, we see that in America. We're seeing it, saw it when the EU, for Brexit, we saw lots of this, is that there's just a division in priorities. The other piece of this is that when things get scarce, things get rough. And so part of that's a mindset thing, I think, and you have a scarcity mindset or you have abundance mindset. But when we're talking about it on a global scale, North Korea, things are scarce, right? Things are scarce. So things are a
Cuba,
little,
I was just there. So scarce.
it's
Yeah.
scarce, right? So when things get scarce, things get goofy. But here's what I would say is that with the retribalization, and I mean that in the way that we become less dependent on sharing physical resources close together. We can generate power with some solar panels. You can distill your own water. You can grow your own food. You can do a lot of things without having to be physically close. You don't have to necessarily be on the grid. You can do more things independently that for a reasonable cost that we weren't able to do before. So people are not necessarily even physically as close to like just you and I are talking right now, and we're not even close to each other. So that physically spreads people out, which that we're seeing that all over, right? We've been seeing that basically since call it the late 60s, early 70s, and that's when the Great Migration kind of started to take effect, in my opinion, as people really began to move quickly far distances, right? We see a reshuffling of the world's cultures, and that hasn't necessarily happened everywhere. I'm talking about mostly the Western world, and I think that we've kind of yet to see that out of China, India. Largely, the Chinese have always been not huge explorers necessarily. Certainly not like the British manifest destiny motherfuckers, right? Spread out the world, right? So again, then that was a huge change. That was a huge change. That was only, 300 years ago. So I think we're I think frankly. So I'm not sure that it's even relevant or even matters like what I would want to see, if that makes sense. Is that because it's Gandhi, right? It's be the change you want to see in the world. So fucking I will affect it as much as I'm going to affect it, but I certainly don't ever want to look back and go, I should have, I should have stood up for what I believed at the time, or I should have done anything, right? Should's the dirty word, right? Like, do it. Let's go, right? Get on your horse, right? There's no fucking time for this wishy-washy bullshit, right? Get up or shut up,
I
So
always think about too, like when I have to project, I have to assume my body will someday die. Okay. Now there's really cool indefinite life extension possibilities and mind uploading, all this cool
I
shit.
was gonna say, I'm like,
So
Elon's
you never
there.
know. You never know. Like we may live to 500. And then we may continue on in digital form or, that anyway, God, what was I going to say before I went on that tangent? Oh God, I think I lost it.
You gotta get used to that, right?
Oh darn.
I
Oh
think it's going to be interesting. I think at the very least it'll be interesting.
yeah,
And
the future will be interesting. And
I had a good friend and mentor to me said that we have a lust for the novel, and I always thought that was kind of beautiful and a
I
very
do.
concise way of saying it. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
Mike Bausch gets credit for that one.
Hmm. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we should chat about before we say goodbye,
Well,
before we stop recording.
I'm always grateful for the opportunity to chat with you and kind of have a unconstructive or unconstructed, not unconstructive, hopefully,
Yeah.
conversation about the kind of special people that you've arranged, and let's keep the conversation going on how we might better benefit them in any way that we can, because if you're going to help the people, I think those are the ones to help, the ones to put together and what I say, get up or shut up. So let's help them get up.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what I was going to say is I think about like assuming my body will die
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
when I'm at the end of my life. Like I don't want to have regrets. That's my goal. It's like no regrets. I
Mhm.
want to feel really proud of the choices I made. And if I made choices in error, that I didn't stick with it, that I was brave enough to like make a change.
Yeah, yeah, to hang in there. Yeah, and I think that is probably it is the most underappreciated component of it, is that it's very easy to like have motivation at the beginning. It's when things get dicey and hard that it matters that you stick it out, and that's the thing about building businesses, as founders, and is that there is going to be a time when that it's going to feel like everything is lost. It's your ability to keep going, because success is nothing more than getting up one more time, right?
And it's so
Just
mental.
don't quit. Don't quit. Just don't quit.
When the tough get going, or sorry, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. That's like an old saying. And I think it's true. And so much of this is mental also. Like
Oh,
the
really?
people who become like the greatest contributors, of course, they would have had roadblocks and uphill battles and difficulties and emotional, challenges, but they just didn't give up. They kept at it until they reached their goal. They kept learning their way to solution. And that's what I want to like
Yeah.
hope that everyone will do. Like, don't give up. Like, have your goals, be a good person, keep learning, choose
Mhm.
wisely who you have in your inner circle. Like, but just
Well,
don't give up.
and I would also say that part of what will, or at least has inspired me, is hearing from those people who have been to the places I'm trying to go, that the struggles that they went through is can be very actually, so I have one more. I've got a great story for you. You might like this. So let me see. So my great grandfather, his name's PJ Batenburg. He invented the four-wheel drive and electroplating. And so he did business like all over the world, like a super, super rad human being. So I happen to have all of his, not all, but a bunch of his documents, like his actual documents where he was like doing business all over the world. He's got um, all of these communication with countries all over the world. And this is in the 1920s. So they're like telefaxes, and like they're written on this like parchment paper to make it super light, right? Because they need to send it halfway across the world, and all the postage from that and everything. So
Wow.
super fucking cool dude. But he was a venture capitalist. They didn't call it that, but that's what he was, right? And his electroplating is actually in the Smithsonian. But this is my favorite story. Is so he invented four-wheel drive, right? Patented it, and then he was writing to all of the car companies like Ford Motor Company. So this is communication from Ford Motor Company signed by the president of Ford Motor Company. But this is why it's inspiring to me. He goes, "Dear sir, we have previously given much consideration to multiple drive for motor vehicles. At the present time, it does not indicate that is the proper time to take up such construction or manufacture. In what future may require, we are unable to state. We are returning your data as requested." Okay. That is one of probably 30 rejection letters from every major car company that you can name, signed by their CEOs, telling him that they didn't think four-wheel drive was a good idea. So sometimes you're not wrong, you're just early. Which is largely how I felt about cannabis for the past 5 years or so. But everything from, I'm looking for the picture of them. Oh, here you go. There's a picture of them.
Oh, cool. I love this.
There's PJ.
Wow, what
So,
a dapper guy.
so whenever I'm feeling like getting my ass kicked, eating ramen, trying to build these companies, specifically the Clear, I always reach in my desk and look at one of the letters of how being told how stupid he is. This is another good one. This is from the Acme Motor Trucking Company. This is what became Cadillac. Replying to yours of 12th concerning your patents on the four-wheel brakes, desired to say that we will not be interested in the proposition of this character at this time. Very truly yours, from the GM. So, I don't know. Talking to people who have similar experiences to you, and people that have failed with something that obviously 100 years later we know that is in every vehicle on the planet, is kind of like, well, stick with it. You got told by literally everybody that he was an idiot and they don't want it, and
Yeah.
now everyone on the planet uses it. So
And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier, Rick. When you really believe in something, don't give up. Don't fake. Don't cower. Believe in it and act accordingly.
So he used to sell in Popular Mechanics the electroplating process, which is basically like that's how that you put shine on like silverware.
Yeah.
Is that what this was? And so he's got all these communications from people responding that from all over the world. But the reason I pulled this out is because so you see that logo, right?
BAT
That
products
that products and development
and
in
develop.
Racine, Wisconsin. But the reason I show you that is because I'll show you what I did when. Let me show you the logo for. This is such a silly thing. So I have
Mm.
I so I redid his logo
Oh, how fun.
for our venture capital for the venture capital
Oh,
firm.
I love that. I love bats.
Well, we're the Batenburgs.
Yeah, and you're the Batenbergs. Well, I love Halloween, so I'm think I'm gonna end up getting some tattoos of some bats somewhere. Like a
Bats
flock of bats.
they're cool. They're cool animals.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I don't
thank you
know.
so much for sharing that. What a cool family story.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was my pleasure. Of course, I feel so grateful to have all the thing. I got to have them framed here, so I have to
Yeah.
stop taking out of a FedEx envelope. But
I love that. So cool. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing all your opinions and telling us about your story as a polymathic kind of guy.
sure.
Thanks for being
Oh yeah.
on.
Hey, it's
It was a
my
pleasure.
pleasure. Yeah, likewise. Appreciate you.
All right. Well, everybody, I hope you found this interesting and found Rick's story inspiring and insightful like I did. All right. Bye, everybody.